Hello and welcome to the Bankers video series In Conversation with Ajay Banga. I'm Joy Macknight, editor of The Banker, and with me in the studio is the 14th president of the World Bank, Ajay Banga. In the first chapter, we'll be discussing the state of the world. Ajay, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Joy, and for giving me the time.
So you were appointed and took up the role in June this year, and since then you've just been traveling the world. I was wondering, what have you learned from your travels?
Yeah, so actually, it's not just since June, but the 3 months before that when I was the nominee. So I will tell you what I picked up over these 8, 9 months. I've had a chance to meet maybe 90 odd governments over the time, about 100 odd CSOs, and about 15, 20 CEOs of various asset managers and pension funds, and now a few operators. Everywhere I travel, I try and do a lunch or a dinner with 3 or 4 private sector people as well to get to understand what's on their mind. So that's what I picked up from this crowd. And the first one was that the World Bank had done a pretty good job with everybody else on focusing on poverty for 3 or 4 decades. And there were real gains made in the world. A lot of the gains came out of China and India and countries that grew their workforce through good economic policies and growth over the past 30 years. The pandemic set that back. And then the combination of that with climate and the challenges around what looks to feels like worse and worse climate events happening over the last 5, 7, 8 years. I think that combination, combined with the war in Ukraine, fragility, conflict in parts of Africa, now, of course, exacerbated by what's going on with Hamas and Israel in Gaza. So the bad news has gathered some steam. And the unfortunate part is that these crises have got intertwined. So if you think about, climate, and you see it from the viewpoint of a farmer in Kenya who hasn't had proper rainfall for 4 years or 5 years, as President Ruto would tell you, what used to happen was they used to have 2 crops a year because of the good rainfall. It's down to one. With one, the guy can't afford to keep the cattle that they kept, so the dairy income goes away. When the dairy income goes away and the crops are down to one, now he can no longer keep the farm laborer. When he can no longer keep the farm laborer, he takes his kids out of school and back onto the farm. And he starts with a girl child. Now, if you think about the poverty narrative, that's the exact opposite of what you want. You wanted the girl child to go to school, and we worked really hard for 3, 4 decades, all of us, to get that to happen. So I think the first thing was that these intertwined challenges have driven poverty's sort of decline into the opposite direction over the past 3, 4 years. The second big topic that comes across is that the global south, a term I don't like because it actually doesn't represent what I mean, more like the developing world, has begun to lose faith in the developed world. From their perspective, their reasons are, you told us you would give us 100 billion, and we haven't seen it for a few years, and now we are saying it's there, but it's been a few years to get there. Second, the energy rules don't seem to apply kind of equally. And we feel like we're paying for your prosperity. This is how they feel, right or wrong. That's how they feel. And the third thing they refer to is that you told us there wasn't that kind of money, but when you had a war in Ukraine, money did show up, which means that you're making choices. And we'd like to be part of the choice. That's kind of the way they speak about it. Now, there are good answers from both sides for each of those points, but this is their net perception. So we need to work hard to change that. And the third thing that comes across is that everywhere I went, people who get money from the bank, of course they like the money. But over time, the money becomes a smaller part of their budget. That's how it should be. They should be prospering and need less money from the bank. What they really want is our knowledge. That I hadn't completely understood when I started my opportunity here. I've kind of got to really value that. And so I think of us now as a money bank and a knowledge bank as a result of that third thing. So that's kind of the three big things I picked up. They love our people. They know we have the quality of knowledge. They know we have subject matter expertise. But they want us to be able to use that knowledge in ways they really want. And those were the three things: this little mistrust issue, the issue of intertwined challenges, and the issue of, hey, listen, we really need your knowledge.
Okay, I want to come back to the mistrust issue, but I also wanted to look at 2024. Obviously, a lot of economists are predicting a slowdown in growth, so still growth, but a much lower growth level, let's say, than in 2023 and before, in terms of 2 to 3% globally. What do you see as sort of some of the bright spots in the global economy?
So the first thing is that, to be completely honest, I think we've actually done better in the global economy than any of us expected over the last 24 months. Now, that has led to various things happening, including higher interest rates, including stronger Western currencies than people originally expected. The question really is, even if growth is less aggressive in the coming years than it has been, and the truth is, compared to pre-COVID, the developing world is quite disadvantaged in growth rates. That, to me, is a problem because then you're getting further disparities across the world. So the real issue is, what does that mean for these economies? If you believe in the theory that you would have interest rates being a little higher for a little longer than you may originally have thought, whatever be that original thinking in your mind, then these developing countries which have debt overhangs, which have got exacerbated by the interest rate and by the currency strength, I think they have a real problem and a real challenge ahead of them. Getting to work on that through the G20's common framework, which was created, has turned out to be slow. And while subsequent countries are going through faster than earlier countries, they're still slow. And the reason for that is getting the new creditor ecosystem onto a page. There are lots more bilateral creditors. There's commercial creditors. There's not just the Paris Club, which was the case for 20 years ago. So we've got a different ecosystem to work together. The World Bank and the IMF, actually led by the IMF, with the G20, are doing a lot of work on this space. The way we really help, and that's the issue relating to economics for the debt overhang countries, is remember, if they've got large amounts of debt to service, there's less money to put into healthcare and education and the things we need to do. What we can do to help them is, the moment they apply to the G20 common framework, so Zambia, Ethiopia, Ghana, and Chad are the 4 in the framework, the World Bank has given them, these 4 countries, in the last 3 years, 12 billion of funding, 6 at grants, no price, 6 deeply concessional. Of the 12, 7 is net positive, meaning the other 5 is repayment of prior loans over those 3 years, but 7 is net positive. So what we can do is to be helpful to them to tide over till they get the settlement on debt that they so sorely need. My point about saying all this is, working that debt framework is actually really important in this economic scenario that you paid out. The second part is that means that we're going to need to find ways to refund and replenish IDA, which is that part of the World Bank that's aimed at the least developed countries, because it gives grants and very deeply concessional finance. It comes up for replenishment 2 years from now. We're going actually in December for the midterm review of what's called IDA 21, which is the opportunity to get talking about the next one. A lot of the countries in the world are stepping up to talk about the need to fund that at a record level because of this challenge. So I think that's how I think about it, that we have a problem which needs resolution. The bank can be helpful, and we are doing with these countries in the G20 common framework. But honestly, all of us need to work at getting them through that framework faster, because till we get them out the other side, they're handicapped with what they can do for their people.
Okay, I wanted to come back to that distrust between the developing countries and the developed countries in terms of, especially around climate change. What is the World Bank actually helping them do in order to address that issue?
So the first thing, climate change means different things to those 2 different sets of countries. The developing world feels that when we speak to them about climate change from the developed world, we're essentially talking about emissions. And the reality is, we cannot afford emissions-heavy growth in the up-and-coming middle-class countries, because their natural growth of population, of prosperity, will drive energy consumption. It should. But that would burn through whatever we reduce on emissions-heavy energy through the use of renewables and the like in the developed world. And therefore, we don't have a chance for the world as a whole getting to the 2050 desired target. We have to find a better way of providing for growth. That doesn't mean you don't provide electricity or energy. 600 million Africans don't have access. And if you add the number of people with inadequate access, you're in ahead of 1 billion across the world. That cannot be the right answer. So we have to fix that. And so The problem is that when we talk about only energy and emissions, they look at us and say, wait a minute, my thinking of climate change is water, irrigation, rainfall, soil degradation, loss of biodiversity, climate events and catastrophes. That's how they think of climate change, adaptation and survival. And they think of us as thinking of climate change as mitigation and energy emissions. We have to be careful to understand this disparity and change the way we all speak to each other to be inclusive of these 2 points of view. I think the bank can help, but so can everybody else. And so I speak about this everywhere I can because I think we are all saying the same thing. There's a cause and effect here, and we're missing that point. And we can actually be joined together on how we think about this. So that's the first thing. How the bank can help. The bank made a commitment well before I joined to put up to 35% of its portfolio into fighting climate change. And did this by saying we would try and put a fair equally amount into mitigation and adaptation. And we would do that in a certain number of years by 2026 or 27. The good news is this year itself, we have crossed the 35. We're closer to an average of 38. And in fact, the exit year is closer to 40. So the question is, what's next? What I'd like to do is to take the same time period and put ourselves out for, say, 45% as compared to 35, which was the commitment which we've gone through. And so that starts, but not just climate and nature. So I start addressing the connection between the 2 points of view that I started speaking from. That's one. The second thing is I want to remain with our commitment of 50% mitigation, 50% adaptation. So it doesn't become a emissions only, but also a soil and forests and water kind of conversation. There we can help. The third, so that's money. The third thing we can do is with knowledge. Back to my knowledge bank point. I'm trying to take the bank's amazing knowledge in these different fields and break it up into 5 verticals: people, prosperity, planet, infrastructure, and digital. And I can explain them if you have time. But basically, the planet one is mitigation, adaptation, forestry, water, biodiversity, that stuff. The people in that vertical are very qualified, deeply knowledgeable. I want to find a way to align them such that every country's strategic plan with us, which is we do a 3-year rolling plan called a country partnership framework, built of a climate report, which we produce, that needs to be agreed upon with these experts in the room. So that if you're the prime minister or the finance minister of a country, we can have a really good discussion about what we can bring you as help, both in terms of knowledge, in terms of capacity building, so you can create bankable projects, and then maybe even help you to implement them. Because if you had the capacity, you would not have the problem. You clearly don't have the capacity. We can be helpful. So we have to go from being advisors to being constructively helping, not just with money, but with our ability to craft these projects for you. And I think all those are important. Build the bridge between the 2 points of thinking. Put your money to work at 45% for climate and nature, 50-50 for mitigation and adaptation, and then really put your shoulder to the wheel on bankable projects and knowledge. And I want to make all this public when I go to COP28 in a few days. So it's all a little bit of wet paint right now, but that's where we're going.
Thank you so much for your insights, Ajay.
You're welcome. Thank you, Joy.